The rain had been falling for hours, cold, relentless, and unending. It was the kind of storm that made even the city's lights look tired, smearing across the windshield like fading memories. Ethan Cole gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white against the smooth leather. The rhythmic beat of the wipers was the only sound inside the car, matching the slow, steady pulse of his thoughts. He should have gone straight home after the meeting, but home didn't mean much anymore. The penthouse was silent, expensive, and lifeless, a perfect reflection of him. The success, the wealth, the respect, it all came with emptiness. Every decision, every late-night deal, every award had carved a little more out of his soul until nothing was left but routine. He stopped at a red light, his eyes wandering through the rain-smeared glass. People were running for cover, clutching umbrellas that bent under the storm's fury. A stray dog darted across the road. The air was thick with the smell of wet asphalt and loneliness. Ethan turned up the heat, sinking back in his seat, trying to drown in the hum of the engine. Then it happened. A faint, desperate knock on the passenger side window. He frowned, thinking he imagined it. But then it came again, louder this time, hurried and uneven. He turned his head, and his breath caught. A girl stood outside, soaked from head to toe. Her clothes clung to her like a second skin, her hair plastered to her pale face. In her trembling arms, she held a small bundle wrapped in a threadbare blanket. She looked terrified, her lips trembling as she spoke through the rain. "Please, please, my child is sick." Ethan froze. For a moment, the world outside disappeared, the rain, the traffic, the cold. All he could see were her eyes, wide and pleading, filled with a kind of desperation that couldn't be faked. He hesitated. Logic screamed for him to drive away. It was late, unsafe, strange. But something inside him moved, something buried deep and forgotten. Before he could think twice, he pressed the button, and the window slid down with a low hum. The storm's wind rushed in, stinging his skin. She flinched at the cold but didn't move back. "Please," she whispered again, clutching the bundle closer. "He can't breathe right. I didn't know where else to go." Her voice cracked at the last word. And just like that, Ethan Cole, the man who thought nothing could touch him anymore, found himself unlocking the door for a stranger in the rain. Ethan didn't speak at first. He just watched as the girl slid carefully into the passenger seat, clutching the bundle to her chest. Water dripped from her clothes, soaking into the car's pristine leather, but he didn't care. The sound of her shaky breathing filled the silence between them, and when he caught a glimpse of the small face under the blanket, his heart twisted. The child's lips were pale, his breath shallow and uneven. The girl rubbed the baby's back in trembling circles. "Shish, Oliver, it's okay, baby, it's okay," she murmured, though her voice was breaking. Ethan leaned forward, his usually steady hands gripping the steering wheel. "He needs a hospital," he said, already reaching to start the car. "No," her voice rose sharply. She turned toward him, eyes wide with panic. "No hospitals, please. Just somewhere warm. Somewhere safe." Ethan frowned, the CEO in him instinctively analyzing every detail. The fear in her eyes, the hesitation in her words, the way she kept glancing over her shoulder like she expected someone to appear out of the dark. "Are you running from someone?" he asked quietly. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she pressed her lips together, tears mingling with the rain still dripping from her hair. "Please," she whispered again. "I can explain later. Just drive." For once, Ethan didn't question it. Maybe it was the way her voice cracked, or the way that small child wheezed softly in her arms, but his instincts, honed for ruthless business deals, told him this wasn't a lie. He put the car in gear, tires splashing through puddles as they sped into the night. The city lights blurred past like ghosts. The heater roared to life, and a faint warmth filled the space between them. The girl leaned back, rocking the baby gently, whispering lullabies under her breath. Ethan stole glances at her profile, the exhaustion etched in her face, the way her lashes clung together from the rain, the fierce protectiveness in every movement. "Thank you," she said finally, her voice barely audible. He didn't reply. Words felt useless. Instead, he turned off the main road, driving toward his countryside villa, a secluded property he rarely visited, far from the city and its noise. As they drove deeper into the rain-soaked dark, Ethan realized something strange. For years, he'd surrounded himself with walls, of glass, of concrete, of silence. Yet tonight, with a stranger and her child beside him, those walls were beginning to crack. And though he didn't understand why, he didn't want to stop it. The rain had softened into a mist by the time Ethan's car rolled up the gravel path to his countryside villa. The place was wrapped in silence, surrounded by tall pines that swayed in the wind. He rarely came here anymore, only when he needed to escape the world. Tonight, it felt like fate had sent him instead. He parked under the wide porch and stepped out, the cold air biting through his clothes. The girl hesitated, clutching her sleeping child tightly, her eyes flickering over the darkened house. "It's safe," Ethan said quietly, holding out his hand. She hesitated, then took it. Her palm was ice cold. Inside, he flicked on the lights, revealing the elegant but lonely expanse of the villa. Everything smelled faintly of wood and rain, unused, untouched, perfectly arranged but lifeless. He turned on the fireplace, and the sudden bloom of warmth filled the room. "Sit here," he said, pulling a soft blanket from the couch. She sat down cautiously, still holding her son close. The flames reflected in her tired eyes as she unwrapped the blanket just enough for Ethan to see the boy's face, small, pale, and far too still for comfort. Ethan's chest tightened. "How old is he?" "Almost 2, she murmured, brushing a lock of damp hair from the child's forehead. "His fever won't break." He nodded, already moving toward the kitchen. Within minutes, he returned with a warm towel and a cup of tea. She blinked in surprise. This man, who looked carved from steel and silence, was now kneeling beside her, gently pressing the towel to her son's head. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You didn't have to help me." "I didn't," he replied simply, his tone calm but distant. "But I wanted to." She looked at him then, really looked. His face was handsome but weary, the kind of weary that comes from years of carrying too much. "You live here alone?" she asked softly. He gave a small, humorless smile. "Most of the time, yes. Easier that way." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the crackling fire and the faint sound of the baby's breathing. Then she said quietly, "You asked if I was running from someone." He met her gaze. "Yes." Tears welled in her eyes. "I am. From the man who should have protected us." Her voice trembled, but the pain behind it was sharp and real. "Oliver's father. He's powerful, dangerous. He wants to take my child away." Ethan's eyes darkened. He knew that kind of power, the kind that destroyed everything it touched. For the first time, he felt an unfamiliar anger, protective and raw, building in his chest. He stood, his voice low and certain. "You're safe here, Lila." She looked up at him, startled. "How do you know my name?" "You said it when you talked to your son," he replied softly. For the first time that night, Lila smiled, a small, fragile thing. "Thank you, Mr. Ethan," he said, just Ethan. And in that quiet, rain-washed villa, something unspoken passed between them, a fragile trust, born from fear, firelight, and a kind stranger who, for the first time in years, felt human again. Morning came slowly, like the world itself was reluctant to wake. Pale sunlight spilled through the tall windows of the villa, cutting through the faint haze of smoke left by the dying fireplace. The rain had stopped, leaving everything outside glistening with dew, wet leaves, muddy paths, and the faint reflection of the sky in the puddles. Ethan stood near the window, a mug of black coffee in his hand, watching the mist curl over the garden. He hadn't slept. All night, his thoughts had circled the same image, the girl asleep by the fire, her son breathing softly in her arms. There had been something heartbreakingly fragile about it, something that made the walls he'd built around himself feel suddenly small. Behind him, the faint rustle of movement broke the silence. Lila stirred on the couch, blinking against the morning light. For a moment, she looked lost, like she'd forgotten where she was. Then her eyes fell on her son, and relief softened her features. She reached over, brushing his cheek gently. "His fever's gone down," she murmured, her voice still thick from sleep. Ethan turned, a rare smile tugging at his lips. "He slept through the night." She nodded, her eyes glistening. I don't know how to thank you. You didn't even know us." "You don't need to," he said quietly. "Anyone would have done the same." But they both knew that wasn't true. People didn't stop their cars in the middle of a storm for strangers anymore. People didn't open their doors without questions. Ethan had spent years being one of those people, calculating, distant, untouchable. And yet last night, something in him had shifted. He poured her a cup of tea and handed it to her. "You should eat something. You look like you haven't slept in days." Lila smiled faintly. "It's been hard to rest. Not when you're always afraid." Ethan sat across from her, studying her face in the gentle light. She wasn't just beautiful. She was exhausted, bruised by life in ways that went deeper than skin. And yet, she carried a quiet strength that drew him in. "You don't have to keep running," he said finally. "You can stay here, for a while. No one will find you." Her eyes widened. "I can't impose." "You're not," he interrupted softly. "This place has been empty too long." Lila looked down, tracing the rim of her cup with trembling fingers. "You don't even know what you're getting into." He smiled faintly. "Then tell me." She looked up at him then, and for the first time, there was something other than fear in her gaze, trust. Fragile, hesitant, but real. Outside, the sun finally broke through the clouds, painting the wet world in gold. Inside, a strange, quiet warmth settled between them. Neither spoke for a long time. Ethan didn't know where this would lead, or what storms still waited beyond the horizon. But for the first time in years, he didn't feel the weight of loneliness pressing down on him. The girl he'd found in the rain had brought something he hadn't realized he was missing. Hope.